is Pete Rose ever going to be reinstated so he can go into the Baseball Hall of Fame? He's already on the All-Century team. Okay. Now, again, I've got a lot of thoughts on Pete Rose, and I know there's a segment of you folks out there that said, hey, he broke Rule 21, he gambled. I get it. Pete Rose was not a choir boy. He was not a saint. The man had a lot of faults. But when it came to performing on the baseball field, there are a few that did it better. He played in more games than anyone. He had more hits than anyone. And I know as a kid growing up, every Little League coach I had in the Solana Beach Little League, or in Pony League when I played up in Encinitas, or Colt League, or when I get into, high school baseball, you got to play the game like Pete Rose. Once upon a time when I was a little kid in Little League, I used to drop my bat and sprint to first base. Granted, I didn't sprint very fast, but I sprint to first base. You wanted to play the game like Pete Rose with the love, the passion, the intensity, the grit, the hustle. He epitomized what baseball and really sports is all about. Off the field, not a real sharp guy. In fact, him and Shoeless Joe Jackson, there were a total of 17 players yesterday, including those two, that had their status changed. And I'm not going to get into a lot of names that are nondescript to the viewing audience, but both of these guys were not Phi Beta Kappas. Pete Rose was he was a PhD when it came to baseball, but off the field, not very smart. A lot of mistakes. And if he'd have kept his mouth shut after he was banned in August of 1989, he may have been back in the game in 1990. Now, I've told this story before on the air, and I'm going to tell it again. In my career in radio, I've met a lot of wonderful people. And one of the gentlemen that I met was Dave Garcia, Greg Garcia, who used to play for the Cardinals and the Padres, his grandfather. A very good friend of mine. And Dave passed away a few years ago in his mid-90s. Great guy. Spent over 70 years in professional baseball, whether as a player, coach, scout, major league manager with the Indians and the Angels. Just an incredible man. And Bill Werndell, who I worked with at 690 and at 1090, great guy. One of my favorite guys I've ever worked with and one of my favorite people of all time. We set up this dinner with Bill's best friend, a guy by the name of Bill White. Now, Bill White, for you longtime baseball fans, are going to know who he is. Bill White played with the St. Louis Cardinals, the Giants. I think he finished up with the Yankees. I don't know his exact resume as a player, but I know he was a damn good player and a very underrated player. And then he became a broadcaster for the Yankees for many, many years. A really classy guy, Bill White. Then he became the National League president. And we don't have like a National League president and an American League president now. We just have a commissioner of baseball, and that's Rob Manfred. And so anyways, Bill White is coming out to San Diego. And one of his managers, it may have been his first manager in pro ball, was Dave Garcia. So Werndell gets all fired up and he goes, hey, we're going to have dinner with these guys. And I'm like a little kid in a candy store. Because now, man, Bill White, longtime major leaguer, broadcaster for the Yankees, former National League president. We're going to have dinner with this guy, and then we're going to have dinner with Dave Garcia, who I spent a lot of time with in the Padre press box over the years, whether it be at Qualcomm or at Petco Park. So we set this dinner up, and Dave Garcia's daughter brings him to the station, and I drive him over to Donovan's when it was in La Jolla. And Bill White gets picked up by Werndell, and so we meet at the restaurant. So we're having this great conversation. We're talking about Willie Mays and Monty Irvin, and we're talking about baseball present day. And this is in the early 2000s. I don't remember exactly what year it was. But we're having this great dinner, and then we get to Pete Rose. And it was very interesting. I didn't say a word. Billy didn't say a word. Dave Garcia didn't say a word. And Bill White starts talking and he goes, hey, look. He goes, here's the story. He goes, I had this thing set up that if Pete Rose would keep his mouth shut for a year, he was going to get reinstated. They were going to get him back in the game. But unfortunately, a couple of things happened. Probably the most important thing happened that shortly after Pete Rose signed that lifetime ban, Bart Giamatti died, the commissioner that suspended him for life. And so everybody felt that the pressure of suspending Pete Rose for life basically killed Bart Giamatti. He was a heavy smoker. He wasn't in good health. The pressure of being the commissioner of baseball and then the Rose thing coming down, he died shortly after this. So everybody kind of felt that because of what happened with Pete Rose, that was a big reason Bart Giamatti died, even though he had a lot of health issues. And then Fay Vincent took over. And Pete Rose was his worst enemy. I mean, it went on and on and on. I mean, he continued obviously to gamble. He went over to Vegas and started, doing signings and made a ton of money there. Then he'd show up at the Hall of Fame during the week of the Hall of Fame and be in downtown Cooperstown signing stuff when the Hall of Fame was right up the street and the Hall of Fame ceremony was taking place. I mean, he did everything possible to irritate people. And he was selfish. He was all about himself. We know about him being a womanizer. There were stories late in his life that he had done stuff with underage girls way back when. But I can tell you this, as far as a baseball player on the field, Pete Rose was as good as you'd see as far as intensity, getting the job done. He played multiple positions. You go back to last week when Rafael Devers, here's a guy that signed this mega deal, long-term deal. And they moved him off of third base because he's led the American League in errors 7 of his 8 years at third base. And they made him the designated hitter because they signed Alex Bregman. And then Tristan Castles goes down. They want this guy to play first base, and he's whining and crying. He's going to be making over $300 million. And he doesn't want to go out there and work at it. Pete Rose played like 5 different positions. He played first, he played second, he played third, he played right, and he played left. Wherever they needed him, he went and played. The guy was a baseball player. And I'll tell you, I thought he was a damn good manager. Really good manager. He, in his 4 full seasons, because he got suspended in August of his final year with the Reds, so, a little over 4.5 years. All 4 full seasons, he finished in second place, a .525 winning percentage in his career. He had a .426 and .388 career record in the National League West Division. Remember, that was a pretty good division back then. Should he be a Hall of Famer? In my eyes, yes, he is. And I know there are a lot of people out there watching and listening to me today saying, man, how can you put that guy in? Well, he's dead. Lifetime ban ends when you die. Now, his family, Pete Rose Jr., his family, he had a daughter, at least one daughter I'm aware of. They'll be able to honor their family member. And I think, I know when I went to the Hall of Fame back in 2001 when Dave Winfield was inducted, and I went back to, that was the year Dave Winfield, Kirby Puckett, and Bill Mazeroski went in. There's a lot of stuff about Pete Rose. There's a lot of stuff about Shoeless Joe Jackson as well. But, Pete Rose was not a smart guy. He really wasn't a smart guy. He was a street smart guy, but not a lot of common sense, really. But I want to see him going into the Hall of Fame because I think without the all-time hits leader, the Hall of Fame isn't complete. And you can put at the bottom of his plaque, he was suspended for a lifetime ban of baseball, and you can do whatever you want. Just put him in. Now, Shoeless Joe Jackson, he died in 1951. And none of the other commissioners felt that a lifetime ban ended when a guy died. Shoeless Joe Jackson is one of the great hitters in the history of the game. He hit .356 career. And he got booted out after the 1920 season. A lot of people think it was right after 1919 when they lost the World Series and 8 Black Sox were wiped out after the 1920 season because they did the investigation. All those guys played, I believe, in 1920. And then after 1920, boom, they're gone. And if you recall, and I've actually got a book and I haven't started reading it, Fall from Grace. It's about Joe Jackson. And he actually led the World Series in 1919 in hits. In fact, back then he had 12 hits in the series. And at that point in time, that was the record for most hits in a World Series. It wasn't like the guy went out there and played poorly. What happened was, reportedly, and again, this is all reported, that he took $5,000 from gamblers, but didn't make an error defensively and set a World Series record for hits. He went out there and played. He never, did anything dumb to cost his ball club a loss. But he wasn't smart. He couldn't read or write. I don't think he got out of elementary school. He had to go to work in the mills because his family needed money. And he couldn't read or write his entire life. And then after he got wiped out of baseball, he played down south under an assumed name for many years. Eventually went into a couple of different businesses. And when he passed away, I think he passed away at the age of 64. He was running a liquor store. And again, when you take a look at Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson, neither one of these guys were real smart. And that's not an excuse, especially for Pete Rose. Pete Rose just was a jerk. He was a real jerk, but I enjoyed watching him play baseball. And when he would be on Fox or ESPN and he'd talk about hitting, man, I was glued to the TV. He was just all baseball all the time. And so I want your opinion. I'm fine with both of those guys going in the Hall of Fame. But if you need to put something at the bottom of their plaque about how they were banned for baseball and what they were banned for, I'm fine with that too. But I can tell you right now, from having seen it with my own two eyes, there's plenty of stuff on Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, the other situation you got to take a look at, they're not going to vote on this until December of 2027. And there'll be 16 voters. And you have to get 12 votes. I'm anxious to see because right now, they don't have the 16 people that are going to vote. And I listened to Mike Schmidt yesterday. And Mike Schmidt, you can tell he wants Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame. Pete Rose taught him a lot about the game. They didn't talk hitting because they were two different type of hitters. But you could tell Pete Rose taught him a lot about the game. And I think Johnny Bench, even though Johnny Bench and Pete Rose had a real falling out for many, many years, I think towards the end of Pete's life, they got reconnected. But here's the deal. There are going to be a lot of writers. I already saw yesterday when the tweets were coming out after this was announced that these guys were being reinstated to where they're eligible for the Baseball Hall of Fame. I've seen a lot of writers come out. They don't want them in. They don't want them in. It'll be interesting because they don't have the 16 voters right now. How are they going to put that panel together? Are they going to make sure that they put a panel together that's going to make sure these two guys get voted in? Or are they going to put together a panel of maybe 50-50 and then you got to have the conversation to try to sway votes one way or the other? Or are they going to put a group of people in there that aren't going to let these guys get in still? That will be interesting. And I was hunting around like a maniac last night and early this morning saying, wow, who are they going to put on this committee? And then let's say these guys do get in, and I think they will get in. What about the steroid boys? Now, those guys affected the game. There's no doubt in my mind. There is no doubt in my mind steroids affected the game. And you can say, well, everybody was on it. Not everybody, but a high percentage. I will tell you that. There's no doubt about it. But again, if those two get in or anybody else gets in that's become eligible once again, how are the steroid boys down the road going to be looked at? Will that be the next thing that the commissioner goes to work on? Going to be very interesting. And then, of course, after the 2026 season, it's going to be interesting whether or not we play baseball at the start of the 2027 season. I think they're going to be a big lockout. I really do. I mean, you take a look at this offseason, how so many veterans are still out there that never signed. And part of it's their fault because they just didn't want to play the game of baseball and make a couple of million. They wanted to make a ton of millions, 8 or 9 or 10 million when they're not worthy of that. And I think the owners are really going to put their foot down. I think it's going to be ugly after the 2026 baseball season.